Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 26 series, Rescue the Rockies. And our Rockies are now three-time defending World Series champions as we begin the 2035 to 2036 offseason. Took a look at our roster and started planning out the offseason last episode. Appreciate all of the feedback from the worldwide scouting department on some of the decisions we have ahead of us, and we'll talk about those as we move forward in this episode. But the first thing we're going to focus on is checking out some of our former players, checking out some of the top prospects in baseball, and then doing our annual review of our own prospects, the guys who we hope will be around to help us at the major league level in the next few seasons. We'll start off checking in on a few of our former players. Pitching-wise, really only one that we've been tracking, the veteran reliever Ryan Kerkering, who left us several years ago for a big contract with the Tigers. Had a rough year for Detroit this past year, 5.34 ERA over 60 and two-thirds innings, and a pretty ugly 3-10 record. That said, he still had 35 saves, and his shutdown to meltdown ratio of 34-12 was actually pretty solid. Did give up those 7 home runs in 60 and two-thirds innings, and it seems like he probably got bombed in a handful of outings. His Sierra almost 2 runs better than his ERA and still had 1 win above replacement. Don't know that he's worth the $18.8 million that the Tigers have been paying him, but still obviously a very good reliever even at the age of 34. Position player-wise, a lot more people to check in for. We talked about Gus Nieves at the end of the season. Had a down year for him in San Diego this past year, 27 homers, 74 ribbies with a 249 batting average. I think some of this is definitely the move from the friendly confines for a hitter of Colorado versus going to Petco in San Diego. But his WAR for the season, which I do believe takes into account those park factors, still less than 1. So it does seem to me, particularly given the higher number of strikeouts that he had this year and just looking at his ratings, that the slow but inevitable decline may have finally begun for Pex Nieves. Dial Amador, longtime infielder for us, spent this year with the A's. 32-year-old is wrecked physically, hit 236, only 6 homers and 26 ribbies and 263 at-bats. Had some big offensive seasons for us, and you can see a couple years ago a pretty big offensive season with the Yankees. But at this point, given his age, probably still certainly a useful major league player as a switch hitter who's capable of playing a number of positions around the infield, but you question how often he's going to be in the lineup. Unfortunately, similar to some of the infielders on our team at this point. Left fielder Jordan Contreras is a guy who we picked up as an international amateur free agent, traded him away a few years ago, and he ended up moving from the Nationals to the Cubs. Split last year between AAA Iowa and the big league club. Did hit 279 with a 107 WRC plus and 165 major league at-bats. 9 doubles and 3 triples in that playing time, and he also stole 19 bases a year after stealing 53 when he was up all season. So P-Viddy still certainly looks like a useful major league outfielder. You know, the question is whether he's going to be an everyday starter or whether he's someone who's going to be more of a 4th or 5th outfielder for a team. Marcelo Meyer was our second baseman for an extended period of time after we picked him up in a trade with the Red Sox. He's moved on to the Giants subsequently, hit 235, 6 homers, and 52 ribbies for the Giants this past year. Looks like at his age, heading into his mid-30s, kind of settled into being a 1.5 to 2 WAR player who's below average offensively, another guy who is wrecked physically. Drew Romo, fragile, member of the Chicago White Sox. Looks like he got injured either right at the beginning of or during the World Series we played with the White Sox. So that's probably why we didn't mention his name when we faced off against the White Sox in the Fall Classic for a third straight year. Fortunately for Romo, he did win a World Series with us. He won a couple with us, the last being 2 years ago when he was a member of our team. But we beat the White Sox the last 2 years. Romo, 226 average, 8 homers, 51 ribbies. He has definitely fallen off offensively compared to what he was in the prime of his career, but still a very good defensive catcher who's put up about 2 WAR seasons for the Pale Hose. Dean West, another outfielder who was our center fielder for a few years, fragile physically, traded him away to Washington a couple years ago. 40 stolen bases for him this year is the primary positive thing you can say. Hit 255 and 490 at-bats. Did put up another 3 WAR season for Washington thanks to his good defense. He was a piece in the trade that brought us Anthony Pack Jr., who was a little younger, a little healthier, in our mind a little better at center fielder for us. But West has done a nice job these past couple years for the Nationals. Charlie Condon spent the year with Tampa Bay, hit $178 in 152 at-bats. Did have 7 home runs and 11 ribbies, so still can hit the ball out of the ballpark when he makes contact. But unfortunately, with that 178 average and 46 strikeouts and 152 at-bats, making contact is still something that he struggles with. Just a 200 BABIP this season, so perhaps got a bit unlucky there, but certainly his career looks to be in its final stages at this point. Colt Keith, who had been a third baseman and then a first baseman for us for several years, let him leave as a free agent this past year. He ended up a minor league free agent signing with the Royals, and then must have had an offer where if he made the club, he was going to get paid about $2.4 million. Hit 234 with 6 homers and 40 ribbies and 385 at-bats, only a 70 WRC plus, and he was below replacement level this year. So I think we timed moving on from Colt Keith reasonably well as well. And before we check in on some of the top prospects in baseball, and most importantly our top prospects in the Rockies organization, touch upon a few relatively minor and I think unsurprising decisions that we've made since the last episode. Both Dustin Durbin and Casey Callahan recommended making offers to the lefty relievers Wellington Herrera and Luke Little, and we were leaning that way at the end of the last episode and agree with those two that's the direction we're going to go to try to keep as much of this bullpen together as possible. We've also, in addition to the offers we made to Ted Miller and Ross Nile DePaula, added an offer to closer Rich Hannon. Actually, he's listed as a closer, although he's more of a setup guy for us. We missed him for the playoffs, still out with elbow inflammation for another 7 weeks. But presumably at his age, he'll be fine next year when he comes back from that. So we offered him a little more than $2 million to bring him back on board next season. Most of these guys we're going to be moving on from. Iverson Castellano, almost certainly gone. Cody Schreier, almost certainly gone. Dave Seibrecht, another lefty reliever who's not as good as Herrera or Little, and also a bit injury prone. We probably move on from. Not going to make an offer to Dylan Jordan in the $20+ million range after the way that he played last year. The decision I continue to at least consider is Justin Gibson, and this is one where both Dustin Durbin and Casey Callahan were against it, and to some degree Alkshy and Scott Donovan are as well. And I totally get it. I don't typically give relievers big money contracts, but when I look at the pool of potential free agents that are out there and the amount of money we have to spend, doesn't seem like there's going to be a option on the free agent market that's really going to have a meaningful impact on our bullpen. And say what you will about Justin Gibson. He's been with us for 6 seasons in the majors now, part of 4 World Series championship squads, 3-time All-Star. He's led the league in games 4 straight years, holds 5 straight years, and he's had an ERA plus and a FIP minus that have both been well above average every season of his career. I'm thinking about it, as we talked about last episode, looking for almost $20 million a year for 4 years. I don't think there's any way I give him that kind of money. Might try to see if I can bring him in for $3 or $4 million less than that, perhaps with some team options in the contract rather than player options. Could also, perhaps, since it seems like we do have money to spend this upcoming offseason and there might not be a lot that's all that intriguing for us to spend it on, could also consider perhaps giving him a somewhat front-loaded contract and get a decent chunk of the money spent this upcoming season, and then have him at a salary level that's more palatable to us heading out into 2037, 2038, and however many years it goes. But still not sure when I'm going to do that. As far as Gibson, still thinking about it. Appreciate the input from everybody. Scott Donovan, in particular, suggested doing the qualifying offer if he comes back for $20.6 million. Given the money we've got to spend, it's not the end of the world. Certainly some virtue for that as well, especially given that I was just talking about possibly giving him a somewhat front-loaded contract. That's kind of a front-loaded contract. It just takes out the optionality in the future for us, but is also a bit lower risk for us if he does end up hitting a wall or getting injured. So I'd say that among this crew, Gibson and Seibricht are the 2 that we haven't made offers to that I think are more likely to be back with us next year. Actually, that's not a fair way to put it. It's possible one or both of those guys we at least make an offer to try to bring them back next year. But still thinking about those things and considering all of the different permutations. If I knew there was going to be no interesting international free agents hitting the market, I'd probably make an offer to Gibson at this point, with it unfortunately being a little over 3 weeks till the free agency filings, and we find out who, if any, interesting international free agents actually will be on the market. There's part of me that says, don't make an offer to Gibson and just hope that there's someone interesting, particularly a pitcher, who's available that we weren't expecting to be there. If that doesn't happen, could always try to bring Gibson back on the open market, although presumably his price will be higher than the $19.5 million he's asking us for right now. So we'll turn our attention now to some of the top prospects around baseball. A lot of these are guys that we thought about picking up in the international amateur free agent pool or the annual first-year player drafts, but didn't end up getting onto our roster for whatever reason, or into our organization for whatever reason, and in some cases were very highly regarded by members of the worldwide scouting department, so like to kind of track what's going on with these players, and where we've made good decisions perhaps by missing players, and more importantly, where we perhaps made poor decisions by picking guys other than these players. Taking a look at some of the hitters out there, catcher John Galvez, the number 5 prospect in baseball, was an IAFA signing just a few months ago. He played in rookie ball, just 33 at-bats, but 10 for 33 with 3 homers and 12 ribbies. So it is a 17-year-old. He acquitted himself very well in the Dominican Rookie League for the Angels organization. Shortstop Danny Pantoja, another IAFA signing from this year, number 60 prospect in baseball, also jumped right into rookie ball where he hit .335, 12 doubles, 3 triples, 4 homers, drove in 54 runs in 60 games played, OPS of over 1,000. So a really nice start to Dudu Pantoja's career. Catcher Franklin Rivera, IAFA signing from a couple of years ago, the number 3 prospect in baseball. My concern with Igniter, the switch-hitting catcher, was that his glove was not particularly impressive and that he'd be striking out a lot, but we knew he was going to have potential to hit some homers and walk, and he certainly demonstrated that this year. Played at 4 different levels, A, high A, double A, and then eventually triple A. Hit 33 home runs combined, with home runs at all 4 of those levels, and even at triple A was 8 for 22 with 4 homers and 7 ribbies, a 364 average. Only 19 years old, so kind of shocking that he made it all the way up to AAA. Don't know that I would have been as aggressive with his development as it looks like the Pirates organization has been. But question is ultimately going to be, does he make enough contact and avoid enough strikeouts to justify a spot in the lineup? And certainly being considered the number 3 prospect in baseball, a lot of people think that he will be able to do that. Center fielder David Mireles, IAFA signing from 2031, finally made his major league debut this year after starting the year in Double-A. Hit .299 in 164 at-bats for the San Francisco Giants. Put up a 117 WRC+. Looks like he could be a pretty interesting hitter as far as his contact and his gap power. Did have 15 extra base hits in those 164 major league at-bats, getting his career underway. Right fielder Omer Gallo, IAFA signing from 2030, made the jump all the way from high A to triple A this year at the age of 22. 271 average, 22 homers, 73 ribbies, was an above-average offensive player. Gallo still looks like he can be an above-average offensive player at the major league level. Still pretty decent speed and a batting profile that we think will likely round out to be an average to above average in most of the primary hitting categories. Ryan Westcott, probably take him off the list after this point. He's almost 27 years old now, 27th pick overall in 2027. And he is an established, solid, respectable major league outfielder at this point. Hit .261, 16 homers, and 64 ribbies. Did have 36 doubles for the Cardinals. He has been an above-average offensive player each of his 2 full seasons in the majors, and put up a 1.3 WAR this year. So guy who you can start in the outfield, which the Cardinals certainly did this year. I think in a perfect world with his profile, you'd have him as a 4th or 5th outfielder, but we've certainly had guys worse than Westcott as starting outfielders for us at many times over this series and throughout the years. Second baseman Matt Arnold, 24-year-old, second-round pick in 2033 out of UC San Diego. Split the year between Double-A and Triple-A. Didn't hit much in Double-A, much better in Triple-A, where he hit .288 in 170 at-bats. The glove is gold glove quality wherever Arnold ends up playing. The question is, at 24 years old, whether he's really going to hit enough to be an effective major leaguer. His BABIP in AAA this year was .352, so it improved 80 points from AA to AAA. Not surprisingly, his batting average also improved about 80 points from AA to AAA. Tend to think reality for him is somewhere between those levels, and if I look at his batting ratings, it's still very conceivable that it's closer to the performance he had in AA. So as good as the glove is, I think it's still for question, whether he's just going to be a utility infielder and a late inning defensive substitute who can start 30 or 40 games for you for a year because his bat is so poor, or will he end up being a little bit more than that? Another infielder, second baseman Daniel Roberts, second round pick in 2034. He's a guy that we missed out on. Made his debut this year in A ball and moved up to high A. Put up a 129 WRC plus in those 54 at bats in high A. Certainly like his speed, stole 16 bases, only caught stealing twice this year. Looks like a decent contact hitter with exceptional gap power, but the home run power and the eye look like they're going to be issues, and also already a bit injury prone at the age of 19 for grunting Jim. Jose Ibarra, center fielder, 22-year-old, played the entire year in the majors for the White Sox this year, hitting .279, 27 homers, 107 ribbies, put up a 128 WRC plus and a 3.5 WAR. Ibarra definitely has become a proven major leaguer and certainly performed very well this year. Think that if we look at his batting ratings, what he produced this year is probably about as good as it's going to get for Ibarra, but he is only 22 years old. Maybe there's still some untapped potential there that our scouts not seeing. John Bentley, 25-year-old right fielder, was a supplemental first-round pick in 2029. Finally made his major league debut this year, hit .296 across 247 at-bats in AAA. Houston brought him up where he did go 5 for 13 with a couple of homers in a very small sample size. When we look at what Rowdy Richard, the switch-hitting outfielder, has become, though, looks more like a fourth or fifth outfielder to me. Probably going to have a major league career, but it's probably usually, in my guesstimation, likely to be on the periphery of a roster for most teams. And last but not least, Brad Simons, another really interesting looking fielding prospect who was a second round pick a year ago in the draft in 2034. Question with him was the contact and the strikeouts, and we went in a different direction with our early picks, and then he wasn't around with our second round pick. Hit .236 and 259 at-bats in AAA after he was somewhat more productive in high A and double A offensively. Went 0 for 1 in 3 games for Philadelphia, presumably towards the end of the year. They needed his glove, it looks like. Question is just whether he's going to hit enough. He's a solid, versatile defensive player with some positive personality traits. The bat for him definitely looks like it is more major league capable than the bat for Matt Arnold, but Matt Arnold is certainly a more dynamic and potentially more valuable defensive player. We'll turn now to some pitchers that we have been tracking over the years. You may remember Matt Stream, a guy who we thought about with a first-round pick, ended up going with a supplemental first-round pick, didn't fall back to us. The 22-year-old left-handed reliever, the number 88 prospect in baseball. He's fragile physically, still looks like if he reaches what our scout thinks his full potential is, he could be a pretty interesting major league pitcher. Split the year between AA and AAA, was a combined 1-4 at those two levels. I'm guessing he may have had some injury issues based on the fact that he only pitched 9 games. Yeah, missed 4 months with shoulder inflammation right at the start of this year. So those 9 games were likely very early in the season and then primarily towards the end of the minor league season. Stream certainly still looks like an interesting prospect. He's a guy that we weren't pleased when we missed out on, and I know some of the worldwide scouting department was even more high on him than we were. Still looks like if things come together and he can stay healthy, he could be a pretty interesting major league pitcher. Mark Almquist, draft pick 2035, round 0, overall pick 0. I don't know why that's listed that way. That's really weird. Almquist is a guy that was available. I think it was available in the draft this year. What the heck is going on with his history? Oh, he failed to sign. Yeah, he was a first round supplemental pick this year who the Twins failed to sign, and he's returning to college at the age of 22. So we'll likely see him in the draft again. Still looks like an interesting pitching prospect. Kind of weird to not get a college player signed, though, so that was relatively poorly played, in my opinion, by the Twins organization. Sergio Alvarado, IAFA signing way back in 2027, has become a good, solid major league pitcher. Not a star. 3-2 this year with a 2.21 ERA over 40 and 2/3 innings. Walked 17 batters, but ultimately a really nice year this year with a 1.84 ERA plus and an 89 FIP minus. The issue is he's fragile physically, only pitched 12 games this year between AAA and the majors, and his season got a little bit short by elbow inflammation. But certainly looks like he can be a good, solid major league pitcher when he's healthy for many years to come. Some of those personality traits, the low leadership, loyalty, and work ethic, won't necessarily be the best influence in the clubhouse. Phil Davidson, a closer who went in the second round back in 2032 that we missed out on, split the year between the draft league or the development league over in the AFL, and then high A ball and double A ball. Statistically wasn't incredibly imposing at either level. The control with him is still the significant issue. His fastball is incredible. His stuff and his movement are pretty close to major league quality, but knowing where that ball is going to go is still the struggle for Mr. Davidson. Sam Call, starting pitcher who went in the 5th round this year. This is a guy with a different profile than we typically bring on board that we were hoping would fall to us in the 5th round. Profile that I know Avery Shayam, among others in the past, has said that they've had good luck with. Potentially outstanding movement and control with stuff that's very poor to be charitable. But thought it would be an interesting and fun profile to try to play with. The high school pitcher, also known as Mustache, likely to begin his professional career in rookie ball next year. Closer Tim Knox, another reliever that we missed out on in the draft a couple years ago, ended up being a second-round pick in 2034. All over the map, still playing in the AFL right now, also played in AA and AAA this year, where he was pretty effective, although he did walk 22 batters in 25 1/3 innings in AAA. So that's a little scary, but his stuff is still good, and it looks like his movement and control will be acceptable. Would anticipate that Knox at some point next year is in the majors with Seattle. Chris Tackett, starting pitching prospect, another guy who was a second-round pick in 2034. The 20-year-old started his professional career in high A ball, where he was good, 4-0 with a 1.29 ERA. Actually, that's better than good. Moved him up to Double A, where he was 6-7 with a 4.75 ERA. But most of that was at 19 years old. So some ambitious positioning by the Reds of Tackett within their organization, but he certainly seemed to hold his own. The control and the walks with him still the issue. Combined for 68 walks in 130 plus innings over high A ball and double A this year. Victor Esquivel made it to AAA this year. Started out in AA, where he was 3-1 with a 5.55 ERA. Only 2-2 in AAA with an ERA over 11. This is a guy who we were intrigued by, but looks like best case scenario, he's a useful left-handed arm as a spot starter in the major leagues. Don't think he's ultimately going to become much more than that, unfortunately. Oscar Perez, at one point looked like an absolutely dynamic prospect back in an early IAFA pool, I believe. 2026. So that was the first IAFA pool we actually got to see here in this game. Thought seriously about bringing him on board. Honestly, injuries have had a pretty significant impact on his career. Had an ERA of 4.92 in 56 and 2/3 innings. Did strike out 68 batters, and the 17 walks, certainly a reasonable amount for 56 and 2/3 innings. The issue this year, he gave up 17 home runs in 56 and 2/3 innings, which is just brutal. So he ended up well below replacement level, some personality quirks, and he's now fragile physically. So it looks like, unfortunately, Oscar Perez never really going to become a big-time major league player. And before we move on to our farm system and our top prospects, which is, to me, the most interesting part of this episode, we did make a trade since last time around. Brought in a guy who we're hoping can be an upgrade for us as a third starter. I honestly don't think this trade is incredibly impactful, but it does give me an arm that I like a little bit more than the likes of Andrew Painter to be a third starter for us. And given that he's a relatively young guy who's not making a ton of money, it keeps the flexibility open for us to go after a bigger guy for the rotation, either through free agency, although we're not anticipating anyone there that's going to be that impactful, international free agency, or making a bigger trade as things move on. Ended up giving up a lot of players to bring him on board, including some guys that were previously pretty important prospects in our organization. But ultimately, we got the best player in the deal, I think. It's just, did we give up a little too much volume and potential to bring him on board? So we traded away the 23-year-old minor leaguer, Jose the Walking Man Ramirez. You may remember he was a guy that we brought on board back in 2029 for all of the $5.23 million that we had to spend that year. So definitely, unfortunately, throwing up the white flag on Jose Ramirez by including him in this trade. Honestly, if the Walking Man, who's now 23 years old, reaches his full potential, he's probably pretty close to the guy that we picked up. So, Ramirez was the key guy that we had to include in this trade to get it done. He's fragile as far as his injury proneness at this point. I know the low baseball IQ he had was a concern for several viewers when we picked him up. Still has good stamina, good at holding on runners. Was 1-3 in A ball or double A ball for us last year, and then 5-5 with a 5.10 ERA, allowing 19 homers in 102/3 innings in the hitter-friendly Pacific Coast League. Still put up a WAR of 2.1 above wins above replacement, even with those numbers. So Ramirez, to me, was the most significant guy we included. As I said, the guy we got back is certainly better than Ramirez right now. I think Ramirez, if everything goes well, could be just as productive a major leaguer. But given the low baseball IQ, given the fragile injury proneness, and the fact he's going to be 24 early next year, we kind of had to include him to get the deal done, and it is what it is. Also included second baseman Harry Harkness, not a big-time prospect. He was a later round draft pick, I believe. 11th round draft pick of ours back in 2031. Looks like glove is just not quite up to what we'd want in the majors. Bat, just not quite what we'd want in the majors. Speed and bunting, just not quite what we'd want in the majors. Was very productive in A ball for us this past year, hitting .444. And that actually, and you can see with the ridiculous 31 homers and 161 ribbies. And this is something that I'll just talk about right now when I'm talking about Harkness that's a bit frustrating to me. Some of you have noted over the past several episodes that you saw that our lower minor league teams were just absolutely crushing it with ridiculous records, to be honest. And I guess I don't need to talk about this hypothetically. I'll go and I'll look at it after I'm done talking about this trade. But it seems like there's something imbalanced in the game. I'll finish up talking about this trade, and then I'll peek in on our minor league system and talk about it. But it's a bit frustrating that something like this can be happening. We also bailed on former first-round pick Brian Stoops, another guy who, looks like a borderline major league pitcher. The personality with him was always a bit prickly. He was a pretty regular member of our rotation in 2033 and 2034. Spent most of this year in AAA. His stamina has just fallen off a map, so he's really more of a reliever at this point. Needed to include him to get the deal done, and at 26, almost 27 years old, didn't feel that Stoops had a big future with us. So unfortunately, Stoops ends up being a first-round pick on a college player that didn't work out that well for us. And then we also included Juan Rojas. Rojas was a scouting finding of ours a decade ago at this point, 12-7 with a 3.98 ERA in AAA. But like Stoops, he's almost 27 years old. Didn't ever feel that those extreme fly ball tendencies were going to play particularly well in Colorado. Probably has more use to another team than he does for us. So, with Stoops and Rojas, there's guys capable of pitching in the majors right now. I think Ramirez can be a little better than them. Harkness was a throw-in, and then we also included the outfielder Jordan Thomas, who's kind of a fourth or fifth outfielder type profile. Hit 244 in Double-A for us this year. After he was promoted from high A ball, combined for 27 homers and 95 ribbies at the two levels he played at. So pretty productive, but almost 24 years old, and to me looks more like a fourth or fifth outfielder than a true impact player. So we gave up a decent amount of talent and potential for a guy who's similarly aged, and that's the 25-year-old right-handed pitcher Aaron Bell, almost 26 years old. Stuff a little bit above average, movement and control are average. He's got a weird-looking 5-pitch arsenal. His fastball is excellent. He's got a good circle change. The sinker's fine. The cutter's below average, but we're still holding out hope it could be more than that. Honestly, at almost 26 years old, I think it's unlikely. And then he throws a relatively pedestrian changeup into the mix as well. Decent stamina, not great at holding on runners. Don't love the low adaptability. He may have a tough transition for us, but he's, as I said, almost 26 years old, which makes him younger than Stoops and Rojas, two of the pitchers that we included. As I noted when I talked about Bell, I think that Ramirez can probably be a pretty similar productive pitcher to Bell if all goes well in his development. But that's part of the reason I wanted Bell. He is fully developed. He's ready to help us now. He's normal in terms of his injury proneness. Spent parts of the last 4 seasons with the Cardinals where he's been a bit above average major league pitcher with a 104 ERA plus and a 93 FIP minus. 7-13 last year with a 4.48 ERA. So that's not great. Did give up 18 homers in 152 and 2/3 innings and 16 in just over 100 innings the year before. So worry a little bit that he may be susceptible to giving up home runs in Colorado, as most pitchers are. But he did put up a WAR of close to 3 last year. He's going to hopefully have a better defense behind him with our team behind him in the field rather than the Cardinals. I've probably spent too much time talking about all the ins and outs of this trade, given that, as I said, Bell is better than the guys that we have as a number 3 starter right now, I think. Thinking specifically about Andrew Painter being our 3rd starter today. But is he a guy who's going to particularly move the way we feel about our pitching staff in a huge direction? Probably not, but it is what it is. Still think that he's an upgrade, and as I said, he's a little younger than Stoops and Rojas, and he's certainly better than Stoops and Rojas. Thomas is useful, but given the depth we've got in young outfielders, he was probably never even going to get a shot with us. The question is what Ramirez becomes. If Ramirez becomes as good as Bell, which is certainly possible, then it's not a great trade for us 2, 3, 4, 5 years from now. But as a team that's won 4 of the last 5 World Series and is still is win now mode for 2036, I think Bell makes us a little better in the middle of the rotation than we previously were. So again, he's still making the major league minimum this upcoming year. Makes us better for next season, and most importantly, doesn't rule out us trying to do something even more impactful as this offseason continues to move along. And I'll turn now back to the issue that I touched upon briefly when I was talking about the trade for Bell, and that's something that I started experiencing this year, and I know some of you from the comments section have also experienced. That's pretty frustrating, and you can see our rookie league teams, our A-ball team and our high A-ball team, all were basically playing 900 baseball this year. So there is clearly something that is broken in OOTP 26 as far as other teams being able to capably fill their minor league rosters. I did go through and I looked at the worst teams in all of these other leagues, and they all had full rosters, so that's not the issue, but the level of talent on the rosters was really poor, unfortunately. So it wasn't really something where we've got, well, I guess we do have an incredible team based on these records, but it's not like there were just 2 or 3 totally pathetic teams in the leagues. It was basically just that the other 9, 7, 13 teams in the league, depending on what league and what structure we were playing with, had a lot of players that really probably shouldn't be in professional baseball on those rosters at the lower levels. And I know that some of you, as I mentioned, have also experienced this. I don't tweak too many settings, particularly for the minor leagues, so that's why I'm, not pleased with this, because, we are in OOTP 26 at this point, and you would expect, some of the things like a minor league organization being able to staff itself appropriately in terms of players through the game's AI to be something that's just settled at this point. But unfortunately, it seems like something has gone a bit haywire, actually more than a bit haywire, again, with 900 winning percentages in my save. And I know, as I said, some of you have commented that you've experienced similar things in yours, which is a little bit frustrating. And we'll see that in, some of the players that we're going to be talking about as far as the top prospects in our organization put up some ridiculous statistical numbers when they were just dominating these lower quality teams in the lower levels of the organization. Seems like it balances out a bit in AAA and AA, but it's a little disappointing that something like this could be happening in OOTP, again, with a game that's been around for over a quarter century at this point, and would expect that those things be ironed out. But if any of you are experiencing this, if any of you have thoughts on ways to improve it, the only thing I could think of was that I made the default number of international free agent, actually not internet, scouting discoveries that each team is going to have. I made that number bigger going forward to hopefully put some additional talent into all of the other organizations as well as ours. But if you've got any ideas on settings that might be able to help with this, would love to hear them. Or if you're experiencing similar things or not experiencing it, would love to know that as well. So we will take a look now at our prospects, and we have the number one ranked minor league system in baseball right now, despite, as you saw when we reviewed some of the top prospects in other organizations, missing out on some very interesting prospects over the years. That includes 8 top 100 prospects for us, led by Jeff Colson. Unfortunately, the 21-year-old who was our first-round pick in 2032 missed the end of the year with a sore shoulder, and he's already fragile in terms of his injury proneness. But the 21-year-old still looks like he could be a pretty interesting major league pitcher if we can keep him together. Potential captain personality, I think he can hit triple digits, potentially a very interesting 6-pitch arsenal. And we think his stuff, his movement and control could all be above average at the major league level. 2-0 and didn't allow a run in A-ball this year after we promoted him out of rookie ball. 5-1 with a 1.45 ERA in high A-ball, and then he went 1-0 in 2 starts, Double-A Hartford with a 3.48 ERA before his season finally came to an end. So combined for a 3.8 WAR over those 3 levels. Would think that it's conceivable if he's relatively healthy next year that Colson could be a September call-up for us. And as we think about what this pitching staff looks like 3-5 years from now, when Noah Schultz probably won't be around, and in addition to the hole that we've talked about in our number 3 starter role, we could have a hole in the number 2 starter role. The continued development of a guy like Jeff Colson is going to be pretty important to us. Carlos Davila, IAFA signing from a year ago in 2034, or actually closing in on 2 years ago at this point, but last year, number 20 prospect in baseball. Davila, one of the guys who really benefited, is an 18-year-old from the fact that apparently the other organizations in baseball can't field capable teams. Hit 473 in the DSL and hit over 400 in the ACL before we promoted him as an 18-year-old to A-ball, where he still hit 313, combined for 10 home runs between the levels, although the power is not going to be a big part of his game. Like the personality for the young outfielder, or for the young infielder, although he can also play outfield. Pretty good speed, and think he still could be a very interesting hitter with exceptional gap power and outstanding speed. So very interested in seeing what Bare Barrel Davila ultimately becomes. Manny Soto was our first-round pick this past year, listed as the number 22 prospect in baseball. Hasn't pitched with us yet as a high schooler who signed after the ACL season was already completed, but expect him to be making his professional debut next spring. Phil Dingwell, we talked about last episode, number 28 prospect in baseball, made his major league debut this year. We hope we kept him down long enough that he'll be a strong contender for Rookie of the Year next year, and perhaps a prospect promotion incentive pick if he can win Rookie of the Year for us. David Guadron was our supplemental first-round pick this year, listed as the number 30 prospect in baseball. He moved quickly through the organization, 2 starts in A-ball, 3 starts in high A, 2 in Double-A, with excellent results at all of those levels before he finally made it up to Triple-A, where he was 2-1 with a 3.86 ERA. Another guy who's not too far from being able to help us at the major league level. Would think, similar to Colson, that Guadron will certainly be up with us before the end of next year, and the hope would be he could perhaps spend some significant time with the major league spot next year, David Guadron. Mike Castro was our first round pick a year ago out of southeastern Louisiana. Spent the year in AAA where he was very productive, 293 average, 34 doubles, a ridiculous 14 triples, and 14 homers. Stole 16 bases for us. 103 WRC plus, again in the hitter-friendly PCL, but still looks like he could be a pretty useful outfielder for us going forward. Probably not going to be a superstar. The defense is just acceptable, but good speed, potentially exceptional gap power, and durability. I think he's going to have a tough time making the team out of spring training this year unless we have some injuries, just because we're so deep in the outfield, or if perhaps we trade somebody away. But with Ted Miller being a guy who's probably going to price himself out of Colorado eventually, having Castro waiting in the wings is helpful for us. Couple other key pitching prospects round out our top 100 prospects. Dan Patterson, second-round pick in 2031, listed as the number 68 prospect in baseball. Still looks like he can be a competent major league arm. Don't think he's going to be a superstar, but he did progress rapidly this year. 5-1 in High A, 6-0 in Double A, before we promoted the 22-year-old for 5 games in AAA at the end of the year, where he was 1-1 with a 5.48 ERA. So certainly not as effective there. But again, if we look at his Sierra and his WAR, the numbers perhaps, and the performance, I guess more than the numbers, not as bad as it might have appeared. Another guy who conceivably could be in the mix to be a September call-up for us next year. And then we do have a nice balance with among these top prospects in our organization. Another pitcher in the mix in Kikaku Kawakami. This was a scouting discovery back in 2029 who's worked out well for us, almost 23 years old. Started the year in High A where he went 13-2 with a 2.71 ERA. Promoted him up to Double A where he was 3-1 with a 2.60 ERA. Would have to think he'll be starting next year in AAA for us. He's horrible at holding on runners, but Kawakami is another guy who certainly looks like he could be in the mix to be a useful starter for us in a few years. And similar to the likes of Patterson, Guadron, and Colson, he's a guy who could be in the mix to be a September call-up next year. So although I don't think we have another Leo Martinez, we certainly don't have another Leo Martinez. There's only one of those. And don't think we necessarily have even another Noah Schultz coming up through the organization. We do have some starting pitching depth that we think could be helping us in the not-too-distant future. We've also got 4 other players who rank among the top 200 prospects in baseball. Starting pitching heavy, Mike Witherspoon, our first-round pick from a year ago in 2034, made his professional debut this year, 1-1 with an ERA of close to 8 in rookie ball. So particularly the 23 walks and 43 1/3 innings is something that bothers us, although to be fair, the 60 hits in 43 1/3 innings also bothers us as well. Still, according to our scout, there's a lot of upside here. Just going to hopefully take him a little bit of time to realize that upside. Carlos Sotelo was an IAFA signing of ours this past year. He went 9-1 with a 1.34 ERA in the DSL for us at 17 years old. Definitely not the greatest personality in the world. He's going to want to get paid eventually, but think that he is another interesting pitching prospect in this organization. Left fielder Nicholas Ortiz, scouting discovery from this past April, and we just had to promote him right away, even though he was only 17 years old. Hit 387 with 27 extra base hits in 235 at-bats, scored a ridiculous 68 runs in 53 games for that team that overpowered the rest of the league so dramatically. Looks like a really good contact hitter potentially. Everything else about him is kind of meh, but we'll see where he ends up. And last but not least, another starting pitching prospect, Joe Burke, 4th-round pick in 2034, 2-0 with an ERA of close to 6, making his debut in rookie ball this year. His ceiling certainly doesn't look quite as high as some of the other pitchers that we've talked about, but those things can get changed. Always can get lucky with development. So feel pretty good about some of the young pitching prospects we have in our organization. Some other familiar names here that aren't necessarily ranked as high, but we'll touch on a couple of them. Manuel Torres, third baseman, who hit 290 with 26 homers and 96 ribbies in AAA for us, so really doesn't have much left to prove with the bat. The issue for him is that he's just kind of a man without a position. He could play first base for us, but we have Ryan Stone as our primary first baseman at this point against right-handed pitching. Torres is fragile physically, and he does have pretty dramatic lefty and righty splits. So certainly could be in the mix to be in a first base platoon with Stone next year, but we've got so many young outfield, corner, infield types, no guarantees that Torres makes the team, and the fact that he really can only play first base from a defensive perspective is going to be something that likely limits his career a bit, because I don't think the bat is special enough that you'd want him at DH. Key infield prospect for us is Johnny Castillo. I may remember him, an IAFA signing from back in 2032. He's a guy who had a ridiculous season in the ACL. You can see hitting .571 with 17 homers and 96 ribbies and 163 at-bats. Again, the lack of quality from the other teams in the league is frustrating. It seems like, that will balance out by the time people get to the majors, but kind of silly to see someone hitting almost 600 with an OPS of close to 1,800 in professional baseball. He then got promoted to A-ball, where he hit .423 with 8 homers and 37 ribbies and 123 at-bats, and then finally finished the year in high A, where finally started to kind of reach an appropriate level, hit .260 with a dinger and 50 at-bats there. Looks like a guy who could be a useful, versatile defensive infielder, although not necessarily an exceptional defensive infielder. Think the bat could still be pretty interesting, though. If he can ramp up that home run power, Johnny Castillo could still have a pretty interesting major league future ahead of him. Elliot Bedford, catcher who we took in the 3rd round a year ago, hit .365 in 159 at-bats in rookie ball. Presumably he'll be moving on to A-ball next year. Doesn't necessarily look like he's going to be anything more than a backup catcher with a decent bat, but he's got a lot of work to get to the point where they'll even be at that decent bat point. Jake Lyons, you may remember him, 2nd-round pick a year ago out of West Virginia. Spent most of this year in Double-A, where he put up a 1.50 ERA, saved 18 games. We did promote him to Triple-A late in the year, where he saved 11 games for us with a 1.53 ERA. Think he can get to triple digits on the radar gun. That fastball is already pretty impressive. Fragile physically, playing in the Arizona Fall League right now, where he hasn't allowed a run over 8 2/3 innings while allowing just 2 hits. Lyons, the lefty, should be competing for a spot in our bullpen in the not-too-distant future, perhaps as early as this upcoming April. And last guy we'll talk about, since he's the last on the list, is Eric Schweitzer. He's a guy who we picked up in a trade with the White Sox That was when we traded Drew Romo away. Still an interesting looking prospect. The 19-year-old was 2-0 in rookie ball for us this year with a 3.68 earned run average. Unfortunately, he suffered a partially torn labrum in June that ended his season prematurely. He'll be 20 years old next year. Hasn't developed incredibly thus far, but we still think there's an interesting ceiling there as a potential reliever. The stamina and the ability to hold on runners is just brutal. I want to say he had better stamina when we first were scouting him and picked him up in the trade. I thought we felt like there was a chance he could become a starter. Certainly doesn't seem like that's the case. And unfortunately, stamina is not listed there. I could be wrong about that, but I felt like we thought he was a starting pitching prospect. But at this point, clearly with only 2 pitches in his arsenal and 25 stamina, guy who's going to be 20 before next season starts, has about 0 probability of ultimately becoming a starting pitcher. And while we're talking about player development, we'll move to our initial thoughts on the Player Development Lab. Got some interesting feedback from Wyme943 from the last episode on potentially thinking about the young relievers Kennedy and Joss to perhaps put them in the development lab with some endurance training and hope that maybe we get real lucky and can turn Kennedy, who we've already signed to an extension, into a guy who could start for us, and perhaps the same thing with Josh Joss. Also following a suggestion from YME943, we have made an offer to Joss to extend him, even though he has only pitched 13 games with a 7 ERA at the major league level at this point. Looks like he's pretty reasonable in what he's looking for, even compared to Kennedy. So none of this is set in stone. We haven't started moving the offseason forward yet, but think that was an interesting suggestion from YME943. Because of that, though, if we do keep these guys in there, our development lab is going to be a little more focused this year on players who are already in the majors or who are on the verge of making the majors rather than some of the real young guys in our organization. Leo Martinez, who's likely to win a Cy Young Award for a second straight year in a few weeks, in for strength and conditioning. We did it with him last offseason. We've got him signed for the long term at incredible numbers. He's obviously an incredible pitcher. The goal is just to try to keep him as healthy as possible at this point, given the investment we've made in him. We did that last year, and we're going to do it again with him this year. Kevin Five Tools Roberts was in strength and conditioning also a year ago. Similar thing, a great player who we've got signed to a lucrative long-term contract, try to keep him as healthy as possible. Unfortunately, it looks like he must be tapped out in terms of what he can do in strength and conditioning. That was not an option for us this year. So even though he's 27 years old, we think there's a little bit untapped gap power, and we're going to continue investing in one of the top players in baseball. Mentioned the endurance trading for Chris Kennedy. Phil Dingwell, the young right fielder, going to work on his 2-strike approach to hopefully round out his hitting a bit, as he's going to be in the majors most likely next year. David Guadrone, mentioned him as a guy who could be fighting for a spot in the rotation, certainly in 2037 and possibly next year. We're going to work on the control for the first-round supplemental pick from this past year. Mentioned the endurance trading with Dandy Joss. Dervy Mahez made his first all-star team with us this year, but is fragile physically. Think it's going to be real important, particularly given that we're going to be likely moving on from Ezekiel Tovar after this year, that we can keep that glove in the lineup, whatever position he ends up playing for us for years to come. So we're going to work on strength and conditioning again with Dervy Mahez this year. And then One of the younger prospects does get a slot. Johnny Castillo, who we mentioned, the home run power is ultimately going to be the hopeful calling card for the young 21-year-old infielder. And the thought is to get him in the lab now, working on that to hopefully help accelerate his development. So this is all TBD. I know that some of you would probably encourage us to get some of the teenage prospects in there and really start trying to jumpstart their development. But with 8 spots and a team that is still focused on winning right now, definitely a balancing act. And I thought the idea from YME943 on Kennedy and Joss was definitely interesting. So Kennedy has 30 stamina, but he does have a 3-pitch arsenal. Even if he gets to 35, I think he may have more value as a high-volume reliever than a 4+ inning starter, but you never know if you get lucky. Josh Joss has a 4-pitch arsenal and 35 stamina, so there's definitely an argument that we could perhaps, if we get lucky, turn him into a pretty interesting 5-inning starter for us. And again, we've also made an offer to him to extend his contract, so he could become a real value starter for us if we get lucky with an outstanding endurance training result. And he's also signed a contract to lock him up with us for several years. So we'll see what happens with those things. If you've got thoughts on our initial plan for the development lab, would love to hear them. But next time around, we're going to start moving forward through this off season. Next episode, we will be moving through award season, moving towards the beginning of free agency, and we'll find out whether there's any real interesting opportunities on the board in the free agent market for us. I think the big decision that I'm going to continue thinking about between now and then is what to do with Mr. Gibson, because we've got, as I noted, money to spend potentially this off season. And the free agent market right now isn't looking all that attractive, particularly in the areas where we have some needs. So there's still definitely a part of me that thinks trying to bring Gibson back, even at a bigger number than I normally would like to pay for a reliever, might be the way to go. And we will likely have that all figured out by our next episode. Until then, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.